Divorce can leave you feeling lonely, lost, and questioning your worth. Therapist Dawn Wiggins joins women winning divorce to talk about grieving the life you imagined, navigating post divorce loneliness, and why asking, "Did I matter?" may be the first step towards real healing. Welcome to Women Winning Divorce, the podcast helping successful women navigate divorce with dignity so you can protect yourself, your children, and your assets. I'm Heather Quick, founding attorney at Florida Women's Law Group, where women win at life. Welcome to this week's episode of Women Winning Divorce. I'm Heather Quick, owner and attorney at Florida Women's Law Group. Today, I'm joined by Dawn Wiggins, divorcee, mom, therapist, and coach. Dawn is a licensed marriage and family therapist and EMDR therapist in Florida. Over the last couple of years, she has gathered the most important healing tools into one place so she can help women blossom into their next chapter of life. Dawn began her divorce recovery work after seeing how many people are destroyed by divorce, when she knows it can actually be a catalyst to your best life. She's experienced divorce herself along with infertility struggles and now helps women individually and through support groups filled with incredibly brave women so they can break the cycle and experience love and belonging. She is also the host of the Dear Diary Divorce podcast, a place for women to move from resentment to peace. Today, Dawn and I will be discussing why so many women feel profoundly lonely after divorce, how to navigate grief for the life you imagined, the painful questions so many carry, did I matter, and how divorce can become a catalyst for healing and wholeness. Welcome, Dawn.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. That was amazing.
Big intro, but you're
This
very
is what we
worth
all
it.
need, Heather. We all need someone like you walking around behind us, like announcing to the world all of our best, most magical aspects.
There are TV shows like that, right? Where they always play the background and here they come into the room with all their wonderful accomplishments. But I agree. We all need that. We absolutely
we would
do.
feel so much better all the time. Have you seen? I recently saw this reel on Instagram where someone was like just recording face to cam, right? And she was like, "Watch my face as I start thinking positive thoughts about myself, and then start thinking negative thoughts about myself." And you see her entire countenance shift halfway through. It's like so true. So thank you for all that.
Absolutely. Well, it is for our listeners because I want them to know, hey, we're talking to the real deal here. So, Dawn, though, for our listeners who, even if they had heard your shows when you've been on the show before, they might have forgotten or want to hear again a little bit about your background
Yeah.
and your story and what led you to work on divorce recovery for women.
Yeah. Well, I am a child of divorce. So I would say it really starts back there when my parents were in marriage counseling and it did not work. And they never invited me to the conversation. And I think way back then, I was like, I'm going to codependently, I didn't understand that at the time, become a therapist so I can spare the children from having to experience all this pain. And that was something that they said to us in graduate school, actually. You're all here to become therapists. Half of you know it's because you have pain that's unresolved, and the other half of you are not in on the joke yet, but you'll get there. But I think it's so true that many therapists get called to this kind of work because we have pain that needs to be healed. So I made a deal with myself later on that I would get married and I would do it differently and I would not get divorced. But I never, before I got married, I did not go to therapy. I did not heal all that trauma from my childhood. I didn't look at it. I didn't work on it. I decided I was just going to think myself well. I was just going to do it differently magically. I don't know. It was just going to happen. And it didn't. And I got divorced after about, 8 or 9 years of marriage. We had been diagnosed infertile. There were all these things, addiction. There was just all sorts of stuff in there. Somewhere later in the marriage, I started to become diagnosed with some chronic illness stuff, and it was very painful. And I knew of the ties that much of chronic illness has to trauma, but I hadn't dug in and done all of that work yet. And so when I got divorced, I was like, okay, this is the come to Jesus. And I was on the younger side, so I think it really coincided with my Saturn return for all of my astrology buffs out there. It was the time for me to finally take responsibility for all the shit that I had not. And so as a therapist, as a marriage and family therapist, getting divorced is super embarrassing. Yeah. And I started finally making deals with myself that I followed through on, right? Actually doing the work that it was going to take to be able to maintain that commitment to myself. And so eventually I opened my own private practice. and started exploring all different types of modalities to really help all sorts of people get better, not just women going through divorce. I did a lot of work in addiction. I worked with tons of couples, and I found the couples work very depressing because I think so many couples waited way too long. And then very often I see one couple willing to work and the other, like one member of the couple willing to work and the other member not willing to work. And sort of there's not a solution for that, right? If both people aren't invested in making the change, it's really, you end up at an impasse. And so over time, I became EMDR trained and really dug into the trauma-informed approach because I was still trying to heal my own life. I had cluster headaches. Eventually, I developed rheumatoid arthritis. And all of that was very painful for me to still carry these diagnoses around. And eventually, I added homeopathy, which is a form of energy medicine. We don't have to open that loop if we don't want to, but I just, internal family systems, IFS work, right? Inner child work. And I just curated this group of ways of treating attachment styles, loneliness, grief, trauma, relationship pain that actually clears the field. And I no longer have headaches or arthritis. I no longer have to take any medicine to fall asleep or insomnia. I was in perimenopause at a very young age. I am now still remain fertile at 45. I unwound all of that using the tools that I use with women today. I wish I had all of them at 30 when I got divorced. I don't, but I have amassed them now. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and that's just really amazing, and especially all of the work you've done yourself because that, all of those different modalities, right? It's not always just one
No,
thing.
I
It could be
rarely.
so many
Yeah.
things, right? And you spent the bulk of your career or all of your career pretty much as a licensed marriage and family therapist and then the EMDR therapist.
Yep.
And based on that, what have you seen about how divorce uniquely impacts women emotionally?
Yeah. So, and this is what led me to launch my podcast, Your Divorce Diary, and our signature program, A Different D Word. When women become divorced, we see two different groups of women. We see the women who chose because it's just, they're tired of it. They're done. They've reached a
Yeah.
limit, right? And then we see the women who got blindsided and they didn't necessarily want that divorce. And so those are sort of
Right.
two different types of grief. Both of those experiences, I believe, reveal what was always there under the surface, and the marriage and the relationship was covering it. So, all those underlying early childhood experiences, all the attachment stuff that had already been mapped, because our attachment styles are mapped before age 7. So, whatever struggles we've been experiencing in intimate relationships go all the way back from in utero to age 7. That's when those things got defined inside of our brain maps. So divorce is the moment where not only are you grieving the person, questioning, was any of it real? You're grieving the future you had dreamed of and anticipated you were going to have.
Right.
And then you're also grieving all of the stuff that you never dealt with as a young person, right? All the things that led to you picking this partner in the first place. All the underlying stuff that may have contributed to the anxiety you experience, the insomnia you experience, or the depression you've been struggling with, or the hormonal issues, right? It is all tied to your backstory. And so divorce is this moment in time where I think women more than ever sort of have a nothing to lose moment where the door is wide open to do all of that exploring and to finally get to the bottom of all of it, which can be pretty overwhelming. But to use that
A little,
moment,
yeah.
it's all been stripped back already, right? To find alignment, to step into your magic, to finally become the most potent version of yourself. That for me was priceless. And I don't think I had the courage to do it before that moment, because in that moment, I felt like I no longer had anything to lose. My relationships with my family had already been problematic. I didn't have my ex anymore. You know what I mean? It was like, now I'm going to step fully into what I need to be well and not worry about who I was going to piss off or alienate, or, by saying no, or I can't, or I don't know, by choosing myself.
Right, right. Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, right? As far as now's the time, you really that opportunity is there to kind of dive in. Now, I got to ask you just because you said the attachment style, and I'd love for you just to explain that a little bit because I think that'll help people understand and the women understand what you mean by that. And it's formed so early in our life.
Yeah. So I'm going to oversimplify it on purpose. So when we're young and even in utero, right? the vibe that mom has when she's carrying us in utero affects how our nervous system is wired, whether it's wired for a sense of security and well-being or whether it's wired for a sense of feeling threatened or distressed. Now, I don't know about you, but when my mom was pregnant with me, my nervous system was not being wired for security and well-being. My nervous system, my mother was incredibly stressed and distressed while she was pregnant with me.
Okay.
Already in utero, that nervous system of that infant is being primed for a particular expression throughout life. And then when you add to that the responsiveness of mom and dad or whoever the caregivers are once the baby was born. So when I was born, my mom continued to be distressed. My dad was an angry guy. My mom was a pretty detached type of mother. She's very cerebral, not very warm or emotional. And my dad was pretty angry. So they were present very often. Maybe they were even responsive, but when they responded, it might have been with anger or with coldness,
Mm,
maybe a mixed bag, right? So people with a secure attachment style just move through life feeling a sense of well-being. And even when stuff is hard, they just trust and sort of know that they'll work it out and they're not necessarily predisposed to anxiety or depression or panic attacks or any of that kind of stuff. Someone with an anxious attachment style tends to be a little more needy, needing more reassurance, could be a little more clingy in relationships. Someone with an
okay.
avoidant attachment style is someone who doesn't feel safe being close.
Mm.
And then there's, again, I'm going to oversimplify it. Then there's a disorganized attachment style, and that's the person who both wants you close, but then when you come close, is also going to push you away. So that's a disorganized attacher. So in my instance, I would say, based on how my childhood went, how my nervous system was primed, I ended up pretty disorganized. I could both push and pull depending on the circumstances. I think there's a tendency for us in the world to see women as more anxious and men as more avoidant. I
Okay.
think
Yeah.
when we see the sort of codependent narcissistic pattern, we could characterize the codependent as the anxious attacher and the narcissist as the avoidant attacher. But that all boils back down to, can you tolerate intimacy, closeness, emotional vulnerability? And if not, what was going on with your caregivers? My mom was a working mom. My dad wasn't around parenting a lot. It was a lot of pressure on her. We moved away from my very close family when I was 4 or 5. Those were probably the safe people. We moved very, very
Yeah.
far away from them, right? You just look at this isn't to blame or shame parents, right? It's just to sort of acknowledge how my nervous system got wired, how my capacity for vulnerability or for intimacy got established. I've had to learn those things later in life to be able to tolerate
Yeah.
real closeness. And yeah,
Right.
so do you feel like I did the attachment style piece justice there?
I love it. That's really the level with which I wanted it. Okay.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I didn't want us to dig too deep because I just think it's important to kind of just understand for all of our listeners and just okay, now that when you say it, we get it because we all come into this world with our own stuff and we're really unaware most of the time, right?
Unaware. Yeah,
And then we get in a relationship and we don't know why we
right.
are the way we are or why it's not working really, which is also kind of like, you've said that divorce can destroy people, but you believe it can be a catalyst to their best life. That's kind of opens it up because maybe sometimes, and from the majority of us, we'd be like, we think we know some of the symptoms of what broke the marriage, right? And
Mhm,
we
mhm.
we see this, okay, well, that's why this didn't work. But the deeper work, the work that can really give you your best life is
Your best life.
understanding how you showed up, right?
Yes, and for any of your listeners who like to manifest, do you ever hear any of your clients talk about wanting to manifest or like
Eventually, we hope they get there, right?
yeah.
Some definitely are wired. They've had that exposure. That's
Mhm,
what I like to say. Sometimes, you just didn't know. But
mhm.
yes, I mean, and that's a wonderful thing. But yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so if you've ever heard anything about manifesting or like vision boards or, wanting to call in something that's higher vibe or like, self-care, high vibes, any of those types of sort of spiritual languagings, right? What most people don't realize is if you don't take a look at how your nervous system was wired and how intimacy was handled early on, you're starting your manifesting journey from that place. And I think many women have never even tasted what true peace in their nervous system feels like, what a true sense of security feels like. And then it's fascinating when they're in the midst of litigation, they want their soon-to-be ex to function differently than they did in the marriage. They want them to just be suddenly rational in the midst of litigation. And it's just not going to happen because that's not a pattern that's familiar to either of their nervous systems. And so it truly is like, how can you get as grounded as you can through the litigation piece, which I think in my experience, the women we work with that are in the midst of litigation, it's just that much harder until it's finally over. And all of the attachment style stuff plays out mid litigation. It really does. The push, the pull, the anger, wanting constant reassurance, probably from you or from whomever, right? Or, half the people avoiding even dealing with the paperwork that they need to deal with. It's like all that attachment style stuff plays right out in litigation. Yeah, it's fascinating.
And so, how can, what are some of the ways where this can become the catalyst to their best life? Even though it's challenge, the divorce, we know, hey, it's going to be a challenge. Even if it's amicable, even if you haven't been in court, it is.
Yeah.
It's a big life event that you want to address and you want to look at it. Hey, how can I now be better so that you don't repeat all the same patterns again in your other relationships?
Yeah. Yeah. So my divorce was amicable and I still had an existential crisis, right? Because all of a sudden I was questioning, like, does love even exist? Like, is that even real? This thing I invested in, this thing I believed in, this thing I said wouldn't happen, right? It's happening. So yeah, it's an existential crisis. And I really have just over the course of my career determined that if it's my attachment style and my nervous system that needs to be rehabilitated, I need to call in the tools that go deep enough to do that. So that's why I would say to many women, like, if you're not using the deepest tools, the nervous system tools, the trauma-oriented tools, things like, I don't want to spit a bunch of jargon, but things that are able to help you remap your brain from ages, in utero to 7. And that's a shorter list of tools, but it's being willing to say, I am worth finding alignment. I am worth finding peace in my body, in my brain map. I am worth it. It's not a one and done thing. It's not like I'm going to grieve for a year, 2 or 3. It's a journey. It's a lifelong journey. And I know you know this, Heather, because you became a yoga instructor and you believe so much in body mind awareness and in alignment in that sense, right? It's a lifelong journey of moving in the direction of alignment to stand in our power. I see women day after day after day disown their own power because they don't know how to find the courage in themselves that if they could believe, capital B, believe in themselves, the energetic field around them in their bodies and in the world around them would shift. But they don't know how to find that deep sense of belief in themselves.
And within that, let's talk about the loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
Because so many women feel incredibly alone after divorce. Even if they felt lonely in their marriage, it still can be different, but it's there. And why is that? Why is that post-divorce loneliness just so intense?
Yeah, it goes exactly back to the attachment style conversation. So it's a perfect question. Like, it's perfect. Because I think we've come to believe that loneliness is a people problem, like we're not connecting with people. And maybe that's part of it, but it's really not the core of it. It's not the root of it. Loneliness is really a byproduct of that early child attachment piece. If you've ever heard the phrase disassociation, which we sort of joke about, I think on TikTok and things like that, about like doom scrolling is a form of disassociation, or like when you're driving the car and all of a sudden you can't remember the last like 30 miles you've driven. It's like a little bit of disassociation, right? Or feeling like time is weird, or an out of body experience, or like you're floating through life. These are all types of disassociation. And so when you've experienced hardships as a very young person, or let's say even in utero, if your mom was super stressed out and your nervous system was primed for stress, we start to separate our conscious awareness from our bodies that young. Even in utero, we could start to like unconsciously, my body feels stressed. So I'm going to separate from my awareness of the stress I feel in my body. Check out, compartmentalize, all these words we use
Mhm.
for it, right?
Right,
But
right,
then pile on painful event after painful event after painful event. And we distance our conscious awareness from what we're feeling, what we need, what we love, what we want more and more and more. And so loneliness is really a byproduct of a little bit over time, over and over and over again, separating from our true selves and being disconnected from the depths and truth of ourselves. And then we interpret that as I am missing some connection outside of me. But what we're really missing is a connection inside of me. And then we go dating and swiping and we're trying to fill it again with a different
right.
person. And it's going to lead to another crash and burn. That was certainly my story. And I think the divorce rates met that out, right? Second divorce rates are higher
Yeah.
than first, and third divorce rates
Mhm.
higher yet still. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and I think getting divorced often leaves women feeling lost, searching for answers, where they are also just trying to cope. So, what's really happening beneath the surface during that stage?
Yeah, I think they're reaching for their true power, and there's so much noise on top of it that they can't find it. This is why when I found the tool of homeopathy, if you've ever used like arnica is a homeopathic remedy actually for physical trauma, but actually it can help with emotional trauma also. But there are these energy medicines or Bach flower essences. You can buy them at Whole Foods or even like 528 hertz music, things that help ground us into our nervous system so we can feel our wise mind or our higher self.
Right.
We don't realize there's always a wise self that is super grounded and unaffected inside of us all. But I never felt that wise self until way later in my divorce recovery journey when I had cleared enough of the noise from my nervous system to sense that there's a knowingness, a deep knowingness. And I always find it in nature, like, when I'm walking on the beach or I'm in the woods or whatever, right? When we're like
Yeah.
really connected with higher truths. I think when we stay scrolling, when we stay in our houses, when we stay in the drama of you wouldn't believe what he did now, we keep the noise going and we can't listen for the deeper truths. And something about me getting outside in big, expansive, natural environments helps me remember like how dumb my neurotic, obsessive things are, right? But I think for folks who relate to having anxiety or depression or OCD, like that's all trauma that needs recovery. And so if you're feeling lost, you need a guide, love, and you need a guide that can go deep enough to help you
Yeah.
clear all that noise. And it's probably going to be expensive and it's probably going to be hard. And then we got to choose between like what you say you want and what you're really willing to take action around manifesting. Am I allowed to say
Mm-hmm.
that?
Well, and yeah, no, I think, well, it's, and I think certainly I've talked about it on a lot with a lot of other shows, with individuals, because when it's time to look in the mirror and really do that work, it is challenging because that's probably why you avoid it, because you might not like what you see. You don't
You
want to
don't. Yeah.
hear that. You don't
Yeah.
want to know that about your part, right,
That's
in
right.
that relationship. And it's difficult. However, it can be so liberating, when you're like, okay, I can see my part in that. One thing this happened when my daughters were like teenagers or whatever, or really throughout their whole life, like
Mm.
all of my kids. But and it's the really bad behavior, it's this stuff. And then I was like, and it occurred to me, I was like, it's kind of like looking in a mirror, and it wasn't pretty, right? When
Wasn't pretty, wasn't
you're like,
pretty.
I recognize that, I've done that, and it's just so. But if we're able to be like, okay, I can own that now. How can I do better? How can I understand how I got there?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is where the work then really begins, which I think for a lot of women, they think, "Oh, the divorce was all of it," but like now there's a great opportunity to really do that work that will then, free you for the rest of your
Yeah,
life.
divorce is not a solution, right? It's a part of a
Yeah.
solution. It's a piece of a solution, and I think that is where people go wrong when they think divorce is gonna be the solution. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. I know, when I said earlier it's an existential crisis, like, that was very real for me.
Yeah.
Like, getting divorced was the first piece. And I then had to dig into all the things that led me to that path. And it wasn't cute. It wasn't pretty. And then how did I keep in dating, afterwards? Keep making those same mistakes. And at some point, I just got tired of it. Have you ever heard that phrase like, when the pain of staying the same hurts more than the pain of changing, right? And
That's the only way we ever make change,
that
right?
is
It's just the pain is too much. I got
the
to do
pain is too
something to
much. I
this
just
hurts too much.
Yeah, and I got to the point where I was like, and if I start just owning my shit before it starts hurting bad, I never have to. And then I think I just got in the habit of that. Let me just get really ahead and let me just find my part in this really. And that didn't always come naturally, right? But I think it became natural because that's where but also I have a relentless pursuit of God's promises, I think. I am not willing to settle for a mediocre life. I'm just not. And I think that trust my crazy ideas or trust my relentless pursuit. And if I could tell women one thing, it would be something like that. Like, if you're committed to having the life of your dreams, to this divorce being a portal or whatever, everything is possible. I may be different than you, right? Like, of course, we're different, but God's promises don't apply differently to me than they do to any other person on this planet. Whatever God is to you, I'm not calling a particular type of higher power. I just
Right.
think that women stop before they get to their full power. And we have the ability to create life inside of us. We are so powerful. When we decide, when we get really clear. Have you ever seen that happen with someone mid litigation? They just got really clear on where they weren't going to, like so clear that they were not going to bend on a certain thing. And all of a sudden that thing, it just clicked in the litigation. I think
Well, and
that
I think it's the clarity on I am going, like, this is so important, but then also the clarity that, you know what? I can also let this go. And it's very powerful because I think with either one, they're able to get clarity, but they're going to, they're like, that one won't define me, or I'm not going to let these issues that I thought were monumental have that kind of effect on me. But this is what is important. And that doesn't come easy or naturally for everybody. It takes some work. And I think what you were saying earlier, Don, removing yourself from the noise of your spouse, your children, the attorneys, all your friends, what your parents say you
yes,
have to have and do. And that can be so influential and domineering, and
the
particularly
noise.
in a divorce. And a lot of women are leaning on their parents for help with the children, with the finances. And so then that can be a lot of noise, right? Because they have their opinions because they love you. However, you may have to co-parent with this person. You still have to separate them, and you might not feel as angry as they are, right? Because and so I think that all of that noise, all of those things you're talking about, if you can allow and provide a space to give you that, the clarity will come.
Yeah, you're right, to say space. And I know that's what yoga does for you, right? It helps you carve into that quiet space where all of a sudden you're connected with yourself. Yeah, it's like, it's priceless, priceless to have that
And
clarity.
like you were saying, nature too, just something that gives you that. Now let's talk about, because you use trauma informed tools, including the EMDR in your work. I'd love if you could just explain to our listeners how those approaches can really help women move maybe from resentment to more peace.
So we have this free tool called the Loneliness Roadmap, and I can give you the link for the show notes. And this is a tool that I love for women going through divorce because the divorce doesn't creep in at 2 p.m. in the afternoon when you're at your therapist's office. It creeps in at 2 a.m. when you're alone and it's quiet and your kids went to their dad's and you're terrified of what's behind the shower curtain or whatever. At least I was. That was me.
Right. Yeah.
So I made this tool called the Loneliness Roadmap, and I actually am teaching women how to do EMDR at home in the tool. So I made this sort of immersive journaling program, totally free, where I am on camera and I am walking you through this, and I'm teaching you how to cross your arms across your chest and butterfly tap, left, right, left, right, left, right. It's bilateral simulation. You can hop on YouTube and pull up bilateral simulation tracks. EMDR and its tool of bilateral two-sided stimulation has caught on, right? It started to catch on truly. Have you ever seen a reel on TikTok or Instagram of the ball bouncing left and right on the screen. That's using bilateral stimulation to help create calmness or reduce anxiety or to get grounded in the body. So EMDR using that two-sided stimulation is an inborn thing that our intelligent creator created inside of our body that helps us release pain and discomfort, come home to a grounded sense of self, to desensitize and reprocess. That's the D and the R in the EMDR. To desensitize the pain we're feeling, to reprocess it from, I can never have what I want because I'm getting divorced, to, well, actually, I can have what I want, right? There's this transformation that happens using this bilateral stimulation that helps you move from this negative belief to the positive belief. Now, the reason that is so freaking important is because in our brains, we have something called the reticular activating system. This is where I said I wasn't going to simplify it enough. And
Right.
when the reticular activating system, which is responsible for filtering out all the data in our environment, if you and I, Heather, right now started naming all of the data in our environment, it would be like dog snoring, pink pillow, blue vase, Heather, Dawn, sky, floor. It's an overwhelming amount of data, right? So the reticular activating system in our brains filters out and it only feeds us what it believes is most important for survival. It feeds us what we've programmed it to feed us. So if I've programmed my reticular activating system or negative experiences or traumas or my ex telling me that I'm worthless however many times has programmed my reticular activating system to believe that I'm not worth it, I don't matter, I should have done something better, I'm not safe, I can't be myself, I can't get what I want. The RAS is actually filtering all the data in the environment out and only showing you the things that confirm your negative beliefs about yourself and your life. And then that's how life unfolds for you. So manifestation isn't magic, right? It's science and it's deep like neuroscience. And we know that neuroplasticity is a thing and we can reprogram our brains. And that's what this EMDR can do for women who choose to use it. And so I didn't love how inaccessible it was, how, I'm expensive,
Right.
Yeah, and I think it's so powerful to teach women how to use this because even if you can't afford to come to me, if you need it at 2 a.m., use it. And here's how to use it. And so I sort of created this immersive journaling so that you can dig into it and feel. Now, even though you get free access, though, you got it back to what we were talking about earlier. You've got to be willing to sit with the feelings and feel the discomfort and do that desensitization process and reprogram your RAS. And that's an uncomfortable process.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But worth it.
Totally. Yeah.
Totally worth it. But yeah, you've got to be willing to take those steps. Now, let's talk about your Dear Diary. No,
Yeah.
your Dear Divorce Diary podcast
Yeah.
is described as a place for women who are tired of being good, but are ready to be happy.
Yeah.
So what does that shift look like?
Yeah. So I just relate so much. And I think so many of our listeners relate so much to I was a good wife. I was a good person. I did a good job. I did my best. Like how did I get here? Right. And I think there's a massive difference between learning how to be in alignment with oneself, like learning how to be in alignment, how to have peace, how to give from a full cup, to feel happy first and then be of service to your children and your community and your family next. Right. And so I think there's so much programming that just has gone into how we got to this moment. So much programming. And so much of what we do on the Dear Divorce Diary podcast is give you the tools, the concrete tools to reprogram that reticular activating system, right? So that you can shed the layers of noise and step into your full power. Yeah.
I love it. So for the woman listening who feels lonely, unsure of her identity and or disconnected from herself, what would you tell her is the first step she could take towards healing?
Other than come listen to the podcast.
Oh, yes.
Other
Obviously
than that,
do
like
that.
come listen to
Other
Dear
than
Divorce
that.
Diary, right? But other than that, I want you to make a choice that you're not going to stop moving towards alignment until you feel truly good, well, peaceful, strong, confident. I want you to make a choice that you're not going to stop until you feel peaceful, confident, strong, well, that you're not going to tap out halfway. You're not going to settle. You're not going to give up on yourself. You're not going to say it's too hard. You're not going to say it's not worth it. You're not going to say, I can't do it. You are going to choose to be the most potent, magical version of you that I already know you are, that is covered up under all of that programming and noise.
I love it. Yes, that is great. Now, Dawn, before you go,
Yes.
our show is Women Winning Divorce.
Yes.
And I would love to know what winning at life means to you.
Yeah. I am going to go with the whole title, like women winning a divorce, right? I think for women to win a divorce and what that means to be being a woman who feels like she's won a divorce, both in litigation and in just life, right? Yeah. I believe that means winning my womanhood back. I was lost. I was in my masculine. I was hormonally. I was a boss babe. I was scared. I was insecure. I didn't feel a sense of really security in my body or the world. And divorce was the thing that invited me to a totally different thing. And so for me, winning at life and winning at divorce is learning who I was truly meant to be embodying and stepping into that, because I was functioning at a fraction of that. People would describe me as intense and sick and, smart. Like, of course, like I was smart,
Right.
young and beautiful or whatever, but like I was definitely unwell first, right? And now I think it's the opposite.
Yay. Oh my gosh, I love that answer. That's so wonderful. And now, lastly, where can our listeners find you and learn more about your divorce recovery work, your programs, and the Dear Divorce Diary podcast? I'm going to get that right.
Yeah.
Where
If
can they
you
find that?
don't, yeah. If you don't already follow us on wherever your favorite podcast platform is, come find us, subscribe to Dear Divorce Diary so you get all the updates. And you can also find me on Instagram at Dawn Wiggins. Love a good DM. Come tell me you found me on Women Winning Divorce, because I'm here to help you win. So just send me a DM and be like, I found you. You can also find us on the web at My Coach Dawn.
Wonderful. Well, we've reached the end of our show today. And thank you so much, Dawn, for joining us and for sharing your professional insight as well as your personal experience. Your work is helping women understand that divorce does not mean they didn't matter. It can be the beginning of healing, belonging, and a beautiful next chapter. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Listeners, if you or someone you know in the Northeast Florida area is going through or even thinking about divorce, you're not alone. Taking that first step can feel overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be. Our newsletter is filled with actionable advice tailored to guide you through this process. By signing up, you'll gain the tools to face the unknown with courage and see if we're the right fit to support you during this life-changing time. Don't wait. Click the link in the show notes, fill out the form, and take the first step toward building a brighter future today.